All right, let's talk about censorship. Right now, they're wanting to censor anti-Semitism. Last time it was anti-vax. Next time, who knows what it's going to be. But the State Department held an anti-Semitism symposium for the social media companies, Google, X, Meta, TikTok. They all showed up to discuss what actions could be taken to defeat anti-Semitism online. You know where this might head. It's going to head towards a lot of censorship, a lot of targeting, a lot of removing of accounts, just like what we saw during COVID. This time it's just a different topic. And maybe this is a topic you agree. Maybe you feel like, yeah, this online hate, this anti-Semitism, it's bad. It's got to stop. We got to censor it. Maybe you feel that way about this particular topic, but once you okay it and green light it for one topic, they do it for another. Luckily, when it came to COVID, what we've already seen is during COVID, they did a lot of censoring. We saw this with the Twitter files. We saw this with the Facebook files that were exposed, that there was a lot of government targeting of certain accounts, and they ended up taking those accounts down or removing their tweets or blacklisting them somehow or shadow banning them in other ways, right? We saw that with COVID, and that has resulted in a lawsuit against the federal government. Now, with anti-Semitism, the one thing that we might have on our side is, since the exposure from the Twitter files, they might be a little bit more hesitant to categorize certain speech so quickly, to go after it and say, yes, this is anti-Semitism. If you say from the river to the sea, Palestinians should be free, or Palestine should be free, or whatever it is you want to say, that's anti-Semitism. They might say, you know what, maybe we'll take a step back and maybe we actually won't categorize things. Well, one can hope. One can hope after COVID. But let me share with you the State Department document here. The Office of the Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism hosts symposium on effective action to confront online anti-Semitism. I would love to know what they believe the effective action is. It's obviously censorship. I would like to know exactly which phrases they want to censor, who they want to censor, what types of sentiments they want to censor. Do they think that any and all criticism of Israel should be censored? Is that considered anti-Semitism? There's a big, wide window here of what is being called anti-Semitism these days. So I would love to get the reading of the minutes from this meeting to find out what they consider to be anti-Semitism. So it says, on May 23rd, U.S. Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism, Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt, hosted a symposium to combat online anti-Semitism. The symposium convened technology executives, NGOs, and government representatives to foster collaborative thinking about effective action against surging online anti-Semitism. Again, are they calling anything against Israel anti-Semitism? I'm going to guess that's a yes. The forum was an enriching and productive exchange of ideas across the three sectors. Participating technology companies included Google, Meta, Microsoft, TikTok, and X. So there you go. We could expect more censorship online on the social media companies. Maybe they learned a lesson after Missouri versus Biden, after the Facebook files. Maybe they'll be gun shy on censoring. One could hope. Special envoys for combating anti-Semitism from Canada and Israel took part in the symposium. So they invited the Israeli government to this so that the Israeli government could sit them down and tell them what anti-Semitism is. Anything that criticizes Israel, right? They also had the deputy chief mission for Germany. 6 NGOs, which Germany has taken the path of anything Israel wants, like anything Israel says, we're not going to even criticize it. And I understand why Germany takes that position. They just say whatever they want, let them do. You know what? We're the bad guys. We're not going to criticize. We're not going to say a word. 6 NGOs from around the world, including the American Jewish Committee, Anti-Defamation League, World Jewish Congress, Center for Countering Digital Hate, Cyberwell, and Decoding Anti-Semitism also participated. So they got a bunch of organizations. So they invited Israel, and then they invited a bunch of organizations who think anything and everything is anti-Semitism. The ADL, which is notorious for thinking that any Jewish person who calls up the ADL and complains that they didn't get a job because they believe because they were Jewish, or they weren't given a lunch break they believe because they were Jewish, they call that anti-Semitism without even investigating it. So they were all invited to tell us what anti-Semitism is and to ensure that we are censored online. Senior White House officials, including Neera Tanden, chair of the Domestic Policy Council and domestic policy advisor to the president, and Ann Neuberger, Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technologies, delivered opening remarks. Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources, Richard Verma, delivered concluding statements. Participating technology companies volunteered to consider taking independent actions to address anti-Semitism on their respected Hold up. This is stupid. This is another Missouri versus Biden right here. Participating technology companies volunteered. They did it on their own accord. There was no government pressure. We pulled them into a government meeting with even government officials from the United States, Germany, and Israel. We pulled them into these meetings, these platforms that are on in all these countries. And they volunteered. Can you believe it? It's so wonderful. They volunteered to take independent actions. We didn't pressure them, right? They're going to consider taking independent actions to address anti-Semitism on their respective platforms, including establishing dedicated expert positions on policy teams, implementing anti-Semitism training for key professionals, and increasing transparency by publicly reporting on trends in anti-Semitic content. So it's identical. It's absolutely identical to what they did during COVID. But now they're doing it rather than anti-vax. We don't want vaccine hesitancy. Now it's anti-Semitism. Anything that's anti-Semitic. So they're creating a key position. This is what they did during COVID. They created task force. They work partnerships, they called it, between like the FBI, government agencies, various different government surveillance agencies, and these social media, and they would work in partnership independently, and they volunteered, these social media companies. The government wasn't paying for it. They made the social media companies pay for it themselves, and they set up these methods of communication between the government and the social media companies to give them directives on what was anti-vax material and who the biggest offenders of spreading anti-vax material were. And they learned no lessons. Now they're doing it again, but this time with anti-Semitism. They're going to create a dedicated expert who's going to be on their teams that is going to tell them who anti-Semitism is, and they're going to report on these trends. That's what they did. They reported on the COVID trends back to the government. So no lessons have been learned. Censorship will continue. These platforms didn't learn a damn thing. They're going to continue this. I mean, this is just, I'm a bit shocked that they're just doing it again. They know that anti-Semitism is something that it's going to be easier for them to get away with this censorship than it was with the vaccine hesitancy or people who are against the pandemic lockdowns or whatever, mask hesitancy or whatever they were going after before. That anti-Semitism is, for one, there's a lot more powerful people, I think, wanting emotionally behind it, who feel like anything and any criticism whatsoever of Israel or any Jewish person must mean that this person is anti-Semitic. It's not an actual criticism of the behavior of that government, country, or person. It must just be because they're Jews. That's why you hate them, right? It's anti-Semitism. So you've got a lot of powerful people who feel that way. There's a lot of powerful people who are in various different sectors, and they want to squash this. It's going to be harder then to go after this in a lawsuit if there are people who are ripped off the internet or censored or blacklisted in some way for saying things that are being for criticizing Israel, essentially, and then having that being interpreted as anti-Semitism. Just unbelievable that this is happening again. More crackdowns on free speech that are happening they're calling it anti-Semitism, right? That's what they're trying to say. I want to play this clip for you. This is the Elise Stefanik of Canada. Actually, this is, what is this guy's name? His name is Anthony Housefather. Anthony Housefather is the new Elise Stefanik of Canada. And he went and he grilled some of the heads of some of the big universities. It's just like deja vu. Heads of big universities in Canada asking him the same question that Elise Stefanik essentially asked, that put her on the map, that makes her maybe a VP contender for the Trump administration. Watch this.
When you have chants at these encampments that say, go back to Poland, say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here, Antifada revolution from the river to the sea. Do you consider these chants to be hateful and anti-Semitic, President Saini?
The way I hear them used right now on our campuses, including at McGill, I find it anti-Semitic.
Thank you, President Saini. Thank you for clarifying in your statements that you do. President Gertler?
In the current context, they are certainly experienced as anti-Semitic, and that's for that reason that we have reported certain incidents to Toronto Police Services. But I would say that
I'm sorry, I have to reclaim my time because I just have two more to answer. President Bacon? President Macron?
No worries. They are unfortunate, awful, and can be considered anti-Semitic.
Thank you so much. President Carr?
Yes, they're reprehensible and intimidating when chanted on campuses.
Thank you.
These guys, they certainly learned their lesson, didn't they? They knew how to answer this time around. They saw what happened in the United States. They saw all of those presidents of those universities lose their jobs. So these presidents are like, yes, it's anti-Semitic. This is the problem. The problem is that I agree with him. Chance of go back to Poland. I wouldn't call that anti-Semitic necessarily. That's because the logical, when you're breaking this down, the idea, when somebody says go back to Poland, they're basically asserting that that person's not a Semite. So it's not anti-Semitic. They're saying you're not actually a Semite. You're not actually Jewish. You might be religiously Jewish, but you're not from that land originally. Your ancestors come from Poland. So I wouldn't call that anti-Semitic. I don't know what I would just call that. It's just go back to Poland. It's not a nice thing to say, I guess, to a person, like go back to where you came from. But the rest of the chants, what did he ask? Let's go back and kind of break down his he says,
when you have chants at these encampments that say go back to Poland, say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here.
Okay, say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here.
Antifada revolution.
Antifada revolution.
From the river to the sea. Do you consider the...
From the river to the sea. Those I do not consider to be anti-Semitic. Zionism is being conflated with Judaism. Zionism is an ideology. It's not anti-Semitic. To say from the river to the sea, I've never believed that to be anti-Semitic. I believe that means the Palestinian people want to be free. If that means that Palestinians believe that they should have control over the territory, I still don't think that's anti-Semitic. I don't think that's just like Jewish. There's a lot of Jewish people who believe that Jews should be in control of the entire area, that it shouldn't be with the Palestinians or the Arabs, that it should be, the whole land should be under Jewish control. I don't consider that anti-Arab necessarily. I just think it's a battle over land. Intifada revolution, that is just saying push back, we want to you should be allowed to actually chant things like we should have a revolution. I mean, our founding fathers certainly believed that, right? Because they did have a revolution. So we can't squash this type of speech and say we don't want that here, when actually the basis of this nation, Canada may be a bit different, but the basis of this nation was from that type of kind of intifada revolution sort of an idea. But these guys learned their lesson. That is scary. It's chilling. It shows that when they can fire certain groups of people, that has a ripple effect on everybody else. Everybody then learns to mind their business. Everybody learns what to say. And that is how you end up getting this sort of go-along group consensus, never pushing back. The truth doesn't prevail. This is how you end up with tyrannical governments that treat people like they're peasants and have no, they're just, we're living in a hyper-controlling government in a situation like that. All right, I want to go back. Senator Tom Tillis. Let's go to him here. Excuse me. And let me pull this full screen so you can read it. Sorry about that, guys. I'm still a little sick. I'm trying my best here today. He came out with this No Hamas Act. So the No Hamas Act would revoke federal financial assistance for students convicted of trespassing, rioting, or damaging property while illegally protesting at a higher education institution. It's time they grow up and start facing consequences. So he's got this act. He wants to basically rip funding away from students. Loans, work study program, like work for government money. And grants, he wants it all to go away for protesters who've been convicted of trespassing during the protests, or if they're or rioting, if they are convicted of rioting, which anybody who's protesting could be called a rioter. Trespassing, anybody who's protesting could be called a trespasser. Unlawful assembly, and other crimes like actual vandalism. Maybe I understand that one to some degree, but the others, anyway, he's wanting, but let me just tell you what he actually says in this bill that he's proposing. The language of this is something else. The act may be cited as the No Higher Education Assistance for Mobs of Anti-Semitic and Terrorist Sympathizing Students Act, or the No Hamas Act is what Tom Tillis is calling this. Hoping this bill doesn't actually go anywhere, but with today's bought-off Congress, it might. It actually might go somewhere. Again, this weaponization, you might agree with it in this particular case. You might agree with it over this particular topic, but then where does this lead to? It's just not a good way for us to go. There are already laws in place that if a person commits a crime, that they will pay a punishment for that crime. If it's something really serious, like they go to jail, then they can't even go to school. So the funding issue's moot. They're not getting any funding. They're not in college, right? They're in jail. But otherwise, to make this a law rather than letting the universities decide on their own whether or not they're going to pull a grant from a student is, it's next level. It's next level stuff that, we shouldn't really be supportive of. We should let things be handled let the laws and people pay the consequences based on the laws, and not have these government officials that are bought off by the Israel lobby jump in and try to make things worse. Again, trying to create a chilling effect so that people don't go out and protest. Nobody's going to go out and protest if they worry that they're going to be charged then with rioting or trespassing and have all of their student funding ripped from them. It's just another way to control speech. It's a censorship mechanism. We shouldn't be supportive of that. Oh, Trump. This is what he did. According to the Washington Post, Trump told donors he will crush pro-Palestinian protests and deport the demonstrators. Former President Donald Trump promised to crush pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses, telling a room full of donors, a group that he joked included 98% of my Jewish friends, that he would expel student demonstrators from the United States, according to participants in the roundtable event with him in New York. Quote, one thing I do is any student that protests, I throw them out of the country. There are a lot of foreign students. As soon as they hear that, they're going to behave, Trump said on May 14th, according to donors at the event. So unfortunately, Trump has a lot of donors that he is trying to placate. I would love to believe that Trump was completely independent of this, that he had all the money in the world. That's kind of the appeal of him the first time around. It was that here's a guy with a bunch of money. He's not going to fall prey to donors, but it turns out now that they're sucking all of his money dry in all of these different court cases, he is beholden to donors. He might have even been beholden to donors the first time around, but he certainly is now, and he's certainly taken a very hard line when it comes. He's going to the right of Biden. Biden is being criticized for being too soft about Israel, for withholding the weapons, for kowtowing to his radical leftist pro-Palestinian base, pro-Hamas base, they call it. So Trump is going further to the right, harder to the right when it comes to Israel. And now he's saying that he's going to deport, which is totally against the United States Constitution. Even if you're not a citizen and you're on the United States soil, you still are granted many of the U.S., I believe, at least I want to say that we still uphold our Constitution for everybody. I could be wrong on that, though, because now that I'm thinking about that, the Julian Assange issue is one that they are not guaranteeing him constitutional rights. But it should be such that if you are an American citizen or if you are anybody on American soil, you should be given the Constitution. We uphold the Constitution for all because we believe it to be, we believe that it's not just, for the select few who are American citizens, but we believe that it is for mankind, that we believe these are the rights that should be afforded by all nations to all men, but unfortunately they're not. And just because they're not afforded by other countries to their populations doesn't make it any less of a human right. That is what I've been led to believe, but I could be wrong on that. Email me, kim@kimiverson.com, correct the record on that. Let me know. But nonetheless, whether they're afforded constitutional rights or not while here on American soil, they should be. We should not be for American rights for the few, but for everybody. That should be just categorically the way that it is. More censorship. Let me show you this one. This is a nurse. So one thing that has been circulating online is a person mentioned that the medical community is also heavily, if you say anything that is in support of the Palestinians, it's like, don't go there in the medical community right now. This backs up that sentiment that's kind of been circulating online within the medical community. A nurse was given an award. She was given this award for bereaving mothers. Let me see what the actual award was here. This is what she wrote. She was fired after she gave her speech where she talked about the bereaving mothers in Israel. I'm sorry, in Gaza. And this is what she said. She says, May 7th, Nurses Week, I gave an acceptance speech for an award I received for my work with bereaving mothers who lost their children during pregnancy and childbirth. On May 22nd, I arrived on my first shift back since receiving the award. As soon as I walked into the unit, I was dragged into an impromptu meeting with the president and vice president of nursing at NYU to discuss NYU Langone, to discuss how I put others at risk and ruined the ceremony and offended people because a small part of my speech was a tribute towards the grieving mothers in my country. I was sent back to work my shift while the hospital spent the day figuring out what to do with me. After working almost the entire shift, I was dragged once again to an office where I was read my termination letter by the Director of Human Resources, Austin Bender, and escorted off the premises by a plainclothes police officer. You're going crazy. You're not going crazy, and you're not missing anything. This is the paradox that is NYU Langone Medical Center. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been experiencing that exact same thing. Let me play for you her speech so that you could decide if she was putting others at risk, if she ruined the ceremony, and if she offended people. Watch this.
As a Palestinian American Muslim woman in this country, I am proud to represent my mother's and my grandmother's upbringing through our traditions and customs, which oblige us to always hold space for warmth and compassion for all humans. It pains me to see the women from my country going through unimaginable losses themselves during the current genocide in Gaza. This award is deeply personal to me for those reasons. Even though I can't hold their hands and comfort them as they grieve their unborn children and the children they have lost during this genocide, I hope to keep making them proud as I keep representing them here at NYU. Thank you.
Okay, so were you offended? So there she is. She was given an award, and then she gets back to work, and they fired her because she was talking about her own country, what people she knows are experiencing, and they fired her for that. So this is where we're at when it comes to censorship. I wanted to kind of give you a bit of this, the crackdown that we're seeing, the rhetoric that is happening. There's a lot more than this. This is just kind of some of the latest that's been going on. But there's been a real crackdown on our free speech. You don't have to agree with the speech, but you have to allow the speech. That is an American right. That is a right we believe all people should have. It is something that we claim to be proud of, but it turns out that you're only allowed to have free speech so as long as it's the free speech that certain people like. And that is unfortunately where we're at. The online symposium, though, is just beyond me. The fact that they're resetting up basically the same exact mechanisms that they did during COVID, and they're now doing it again to combat online anti-Semitism is just, you can imagine all the million ways that is going to be abused, that this is meant to silence dissent from a war that many, many, many of us are absolutely 100% against. Most of the world at this point is against it. And the entire point is to just silence that dissent. That's the entire point. Unbelievable. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday. Live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe.
Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.